Right now, your cat is somewhere in your home, maybe staring out a window, maybe curled up with its back to you, maybe sitting 3 feet away looking directly at you with an expression that gives away nothing. And if someone asked you what it was thinking, you'd probably say, nothing. Or maybe, food. Or if you were being honest, it doesn't care that I'm here. That's the story most people have about cats. That they're cold, indifferent, that the relationship is purely transactional. You provide food, they tolerate your existence. A fair trade, but not a relationship. Here's what a decade of behavioral science actually says. That story is wrong. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. And the evidence that dismantles it changes not just how you see your cat, but how you understand what connection even looks like. Let's start with where the reputation came from. Because it isn't random. Dogs were domesticated to work alongside humans, to herd, to hunt, to guard. That relationship shaped their social brain over thousands of generations. Dogs need human approval the way we need oxygen. It's wired in at a biological level. Cats came to us differently. They weren't domesticated, they domesticated themselves. Around 10,000 years ago, humans began storing grain. Grain attracted rodents. Wildcats followed the rodents. The arrangement suited both parties. Cats got reliable prey. Humans got pest control. Nobody designed it. Nobody planned it. It just worked. And because it worked on purely practical terms, scientists assumed for a long time that's all it ever was. Practical, transactional, no deeper attachment required or developed. But here's where that assumption falls apart. Because in 2019, a researcher named Kristen Vitale at Oregon State University decided to actually test it. She took 79 cats and kittens and ran them through a standard attachment assessment, the exact same test used on human infants. It's called the Secure Base Test. The setup is simple. You bring the subject into an unfamiliar room. You sit with them for 2 minutes, then you leave, then you come back, and you watch how they respond to your return. In human infants, a securely attached child gets distressed when the caregiver leaves, calms when they come back, uses the caregiver as a launching point to explore from, as a fixed signal that the environment is safe. What Vitale's team found in the cats stopped them. 65% of the cats tested showed secure attachment to their owners, not tolerance, not conditioned behavior around feeding, attachment. The same neurological and behavioral signature that appears in bonded human infants. When their person left the room, they became unsettled. When their person returned, that unsettled state resolved. They oriented toward their owner, then went back to exploring. The 65% secure attachment rate is almost identical to the rate found in human infants and in dogs. The same species everyone assumes is fundamentally more capable of bonding. There was no meaningful difference in the numbers. The bond was there. It just didn't look the way we expected it to. And that distinction is everything. Because here's what Vitale noticed next. Unlike dogs, cats don't perform the reunion. There's no jumping, no barking, no frantic circling at the door. A cat that is securely attached to you might acknowledge your return with a slow look, a single shift in posture, one step in your direction, then back to what it was doing. To anyone watching, this looks like indifference. To an attachment researcher, it looks like security. A securely attached infant doesn't panic when the parent returns. It simply settles. The distress ends. That's the entire point. Attachment is not measured by the size of the greeting. It's measured by whether the presence of the person changes the internal state of the animal. And in 65% of every cat tested, it did. Every time, without exception. Your cat knows when you walk in. Its nervous system registers your presence the same way an infant registers a parent's return. It just doesn't make a production of it, which, if you think about it carefully, might be the most honest form of attachment there is, the kind that doesn't need an audience. But the research doesn't stop at attachment, because your cat isn't just using you as an anchor, it's reading you, constantly. In 2015, researchers in Milan ran a study on social referencing in domestic cats. Social referencing is the behavior of an animal that uses another individual's emotional state as a guide for how to respond to the world around it. Human babies do this from the first weeks of life. Before touching something new or unfamiliar, an infant looks at its caregiver first, reads the face. If the caregiver looks calm, the baby proceeds. If the caregiver looks alarmed, the baby pulls back. The caregiver's emotional state becomes the infant's map of reality. In the Milan study, cats were placed in a room with a fan that had ribbons attached to it. Strange, slightly threatening, unfamiliar enough to trigger genuine uncertainty. Then the researchers watched where the cats looked first. Every single cat in the study looked at its owner before deciding what to do. When the owner displayed a calm, positive expression, the cat approached the fan. When the owner looked tense or uneasy, the cat avoided it entirely. The cat was reading your face, processing your emotional state, and using that information to make its own decisions. Not because it was trained to do this, not because food was involved, but because you have become its emotional compass, its primary signal for whether the world is safe. Think about what that means. Every time you've come home anxious and your cat behaved differently around you, that wasn't coincidence. It noticed. It processed. It adjusted. You are not background noise to your cat. You are the signal it tracks more than anything else. The most important piece of environmental data in its world, and it has been reading you since the day it learned your face. Now here is where the science hits its wall, because everything covered so far is behavioral. We can measure what cats do, we can track their hormones, we can document their attachment patterns and referencing behaviors. What we cannot do is get inside. Philosophers call it qualia, the raw inner texture of experience, the specific feeling of being you right now in this moment. Is there something it feels like to be your cat? When it sits across the room and holds your gaze, is there an experience behind those eyes? Or is it running biological programming, processing inputs, producing outputs, with no one actually home? The honest answer is that science cannot yet reach that question. What it can say is this: the neurological structures responsible for emotional processing in humans exist in cats. The architecture is there. Whether the lights are on remains the question. But what that architecture produces is far more communicative than most people have ever been told. Take the slow blink. You have seen this. Your cat, sitting across the room, looks at you, then closes its eyes slowly, then opens them again. For years, this was dismissed as drowsiness or coincidence. In 2020, a study from the universities of Sussex and Portsmouth, led by Professor Karen McComb, tested what the slow blink actually is. Researchers slow blinked at cats they had never met before. Complete strangers, no prior relationship, no history, no shared context. The result was consistent across every trial. When a human slow blinked at a cat, the cat was significantly more likely to approach them afterward, to initiate contact, to orient toward them rather than away. The slow blink is a trust signal, a deliberate piece of feline social communication that your cat has been directing at you likely every single day, and most people never knew a language was being spoken. Then there is what researchers call object gifting. The dead bird on your doorstep. The mouse left on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m. The standard explanation is that your cat is teaching you to hunt, treating you like a helpless kitten who cannot feed itself. But behavioral researchers offer a different reading entirely. Social cats, those that live in bonded groups in the wild, bring food back to group members they have a relationship with. Not all members, the ones that matter, the ones worth providing for. When your cat brings you something dead, it is placing you in that category. In its social map of the world, you are one of its own. It is feeding someone it has decided belongs to it. So where does all of this leave us? The science is no longer ambiguous on the core questions. Cats form genuine, measurable attachments to specific people. They read human emotional states with precision. They use their owners as a social reference point for safety. They communicate in a language built from blinks and proximity and stillness. And they have been doing all of this quietly, without performance, without ever needing you to notice. Maybe the reason we missed it for so long is that we were looking for love that looks like ours. Loud, demonstrative, impossible to misread. Your cat doesn't love you that way. It loves you the way a cat loves. It checks on you when the room goes quiet, and it never once needed you to know any of this was happening. That's not indifference. That's just a different kind of certain.